Good morning. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I am here today to do it's not a Friday Reads, but a recent reads where I end my summer reading update number 2, where I talk about how my summer reading is going and how my summer in general is going. So I know I was thinking about this. Everyone thinks their weather is the most important weather on Earth. And then I'm wondering, does anybody really care about anybody else's weather? But we've had the very weird spring and summer with like 2 to 3 times as much precipitation as we normally get throughout the year. So it's been a rainy, cold kind of summer start to the summer. And last week it was insane. You may have seen on the news, we have this really fantastic concert venue called Red Rocks Amphitheater, and I think it was on Wednesday. It was forecasted all day, so people did know it was coming, but we had this very, very unstable, energetic weather pattern over us, and everyone said it's going to be incredibly bad for hail somewhere in our metro area. And it turned out to just like target all its force on these poor people who were at a concert at Red Rocks, and they were not prepared, and the venue didn't cancel the event or postpone it in time for them not to get caught in this incredible hailstorm and rainstorm. Red Rocks is like this beautiful, all the seats are built into this rock face, essentially. It's gorgeous. But that's where people go for their concerts. I had my high school graduation at Red Rocks. But you're essentially an open target. And so you're just sitting there and you can't get away. The parking lot is like, I won't want to say miles away, but it's really far away from the venue. And you can imagine all these people sitting there with their flip-flops on, trying to get down these icy stairs and their very steep steps and getting pelted by this huge hail. I think they had to send 7 people to the hospital, and like 100 people were hit with this hail and bruised and bleeding. And there were broken bones, I'm presuming, from like falling down the stairs, or, probably not the hail. But anyway, so that happened on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, the same weather pattern came, and we had a tornado just about 6 miles from here that just decimated the trees in the neighborhood. And we were lucky. We got a little bit of hail. I was very worried, but it could have very easily been here or anywhere. So I am not, special, but it's been crazy, you guys. It's just, now everything is so green and beautiful. The flowers are blooming because we've had so much rain, but it's been a trial. So, because this is all tied back into our flood from May in our basement, we're still trying to recover from that. We don't have our flooring in yet, so our house is just stacked with a mess. Anyway, you didn't come here to talk about the weather. You came here to hear about my reading, and I've had a really good reading month since I last checked in. The first book I want to talk about is The Animators by Kayla Ray Whitaker. And I had this book, an audiobook of this on my, I've had an audiobook of this forever. I never listened to it. And then I heard Priscilla from Evening Reader talk about how it's her favorite book, and that she'd read it like 8 or 9 times or something, I think she said. So, I was so curious about it. I did start listening to the audiobook, and I knew right away that narrator was not going to work for me. And Priscilla had warned me that maybe I should just read the book. And so I ended up being able to borrow it from the library. And it was really good. It's the story of these 2 women who meet in college, and they become animators, and taking facts from their real lives and turning them into this incredible art. So, and it's also the story about friendship and about commitment to one another, and a partnership in business and in life. And when catastrophe hits, how is the other person going to respond? And one character is from Appalachia, and what her upbringing, some seminal things that happened to her as a child fit into her, play into her art. And I don't want to give the plot away, but there were a lot of twists and turns I didn't see coming. So at the beginning, it was just the establishment of this friendship, and I was just kind of waiting to see. And then all of a sudden, a major thing happens, and it sets off a trajectory for the whole rest of the story. And yes, it was just a kind of an immersive look into the lives of these two women and like their orbit of people around them, and how they took what happened to them in their lives and made it into art. And it was really interesting. I love workplace or career-based stories where you see the inner workings of things, and so this really hit all the notes for me. So it's an excellent book, and I highly recommend it. I had an advanced reader copy of Lorrie Moore's short novel, I Am Homeless, If This Is Not My Home. And, I love Lorrie Moore's short stories. I think this could have just been an extended short story, but the structure is strange. This is the case of where I really don't want to give away too much about what this book is about, but it's about a character named Finn. His brother is in hospice in New York, and so he goes to see his brother, who is, on his deathbed, essentially. And through their conversation, you find out that Finn has been in this very troubled relationship with a woman named Lily, who has been wanting to commit suicide. So, and it was the struggle of their relationship for him to try and get her to not do that. He gets a call that says, you need to come home right away and deal with Lily. And so he does. And that's what the whole rest of that part of the novel is about, is his time with Lily after the fact, after he gets back. It takes on kind of a dreamish quality, and that's the skeleton of the story is this road trip that they take together. But in the meantime, they have this crazy banter, and it's almost like a slapstick, the way that they talk back and forth to each other. And then completely separate from this story of Finn and Lily and this road trip, we have flashbacks. And the novel starts out with a flashback of a boarding house in the post-Civil War era, and this woman and how she deals with a very problematic boarder that she has in the house. And I really felt a disconnect between the past storyline and the present storyline. The present storyline is set in 2016, the weekend that the Cubs win the World Series, right before the election of Donald Trump. So that plays really heavily into the narrative too, is the change in politics and discourse and just, basically everything once that election happens. So there is politics involved as it weaves into the narrative between the characters. So if you're up for, I think if you're curious about how Lorrie Moore is writing and thinking, this is definitely worth your time. It wasn't everything I wanted. It wasn't everything I wanted it to be. Which isn't fair, because what does it matter what I wanted it to be? But I'm not sure it all completely gels, but I think it's worth investigating if you are a Lorrie Moore fan. Another book I finished is called Burn It Down, Power, Complicity, and a Call for Change in Hollywood by Maureen Ryan. And this is kind of an investigative journalism / personal feelings book about Hollywood and all of its abuses, from the power structure to actors and writers and what it's like to be there. It recounts specific shows and specific people in the industry that really were damaging to other people, and how there was really no accountability and no pushback, and just how people really suffered during the productions of some of these shows. So that's like the first half of the book, are these case studies, essentially. The second half of the book is about what Ryan thinks should happen. So it's a call to action, and it kind of it one part of it is suggesting a strike, and so that's happening right now. But just the reforms that need to be made within the industry to make it more equitable and less racist, less misogynistic, as you can imagine. So, and essentially how even the Me Too movement didn't really do anything to make Hollywood better other than just on a surface level. I thought it was pretty good. I was less interested in the call to action part because I'm not a part of that industry. And so I felt some of that was a little very insidery and something that I basically have no control over. So it was less interesting to me. And the last book that I finished is called Reproduction by Louisa Hall. Louisa Hall wrote, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct it here, but I think it was called Speak. And it was a multi-narrator story, multi-timeline story about artificial intelligence. And I loved that book. I thought it was so good. Telling this whole story through the voices of all these different characters who are affected by the, I think they invented AI dolls for children. It's been a few years since I read it. But I thought she really handled it well. But Reproduction is a COVID novel, essentially. And I think it was probably pretty much taken from the author's life. And she says that this novel is based on her own experiences, but it is about the urge to have children, like getting close to 40, and the drive to do, by any means necessary, conceive a baby, no matter what the circumstance. And there is a lot of miscarriage and a lot of traumatic events happen. Birth trauma happens in this story. So I'm not sure, it didn't really come together completely for me. It was very claustrophobic because you've got people in COVID quarantine and the bubble that can create. And but the other part of it was that the main character is a novelist, just like the author is a novelist, and she's trying to write a book about Mary Shelley. And so there's a lot of parallels back and forth between Mary Shelley and all of her maternal things that happened to her and her creation of Frankenstein in the midst of all that, as being such a young writer, dealing with a lot of very strange things that happened with Percy and Byron, and how just really awful those guys were in terms of being partners to the mothers of their children. And there's a lot of female death, and so it's related back into the story that Louisa Hall is telling about this unnamed narrator. So it's a very short novel. It might be really interesting to some people. I just didn't think she carried it off, or it had the impact for me that I think she wanted it to have. So, what am I reading now or going to read soon? Right now, I am halfway finished with Brandon Taylor's The Late Americans, which is a story about queer men, young, like just coming out of grad school, and in that transition period about trying to decide what they want to do with their lives and if they want to partner up with the people that they're sleeping with. There's a lot of cruelty, like especially psychological cruelty, that these characters inflict upon one another. So that's really interesting because there is no tenderness that so far in this book. But there is really interesting character study and really interesting looks at the way these men are living in Iowa City, pretty contemporaneous with where we are now. And there are a variety of races and a variety of economic class warfare going on amongst all of them. One of the characters works in a slaughterhouse, and he's really looked down upon by his partner, and but no one understands him. And so it's kind of like if you took some of the characters from A Little Life, but took out a lot of the trauma, the actual physical trauma of A Little Life. But it's just about these men. There are really no women in the story other than a few just very ancillary interactions with women in a hospice. But there are no women main characters. So it's all of these men, young queer men, just grappling with things, but it's written at an elevated level. So it feels almost like Henry James maybe, or something interesting. If you've read it, I'd be interested to talk about it after I get finished. I still have, you know, another 100 pages to go, I think. I'm going to be starting William Boyd's new forthcoming novel, which comes out later in July, called The Romantic. And William Boyd is one of my favorite writers. His book, Any Human Heart, is definitely in my top 10 all-time novels. I've read it several times. And he writes across genre. He writes spy novels, and then he writes these like whole life novels. And Any Human Heart was basically a whole life novel, the whole life of one character. Then there was another book that I also read by him, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was another whole life. And then that's what this book, The Romantic, is, another whole life novel about in the 19th century, about a man who goes from career to career, presumably meeting a lot of different people and showing, it says in the description of the book that it's like the meaning of life comes across in the life of this character. I don't know what the name of it is. I haven't started it yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's about 450 pages, so I know it will be very immersive. I know that he really handles historical detail well. This book was on the long list of the Walter Scott Prize, so I know it was good, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. It's been released, I think, in England and other places, but it's coming to the US in July, so I will report back. And I just picked up an audiobook called The Ashes of London by Andrew Taylor, and this is a series, the Marwood and Lovett series, and so far it's just taking place right after the Great Fire of London in 1666. So I guess it's a murder mystery series that's set in the 1600s, and the narrator of the audiobook is fantastic. So I know really very little about it, but I saw that it was available, and so I picked it up. And that'll be a book that kind of carries me through, you know, my chores, my mundane times of doing chores and just going for walks. I've been walking more, and just a companion to go along with me that I can follow pretty easily and pick up some history maybe. I also, you know, I was kind of vacillating about whether or not to read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, but one of my book clubs, we decided to read it. So I have an audiobook of that, and I will be starting that. I need to have that done by the end of July, and so I will be picking that up as well. My last encounter with Barbara Kingsolver's book, The Unsheltered, I was not positive. I didn't think it was that well written. It was an interesting story, but the execution, I thought, was not great. So it did not work for me very well. It was a mixed bag. Sometimes I think she has way too much dialogue that could easily be summarized, and so I feel like it drags. But, you know, Demon Copperhead is winning all these awards. It must be better. So I guess I need to see for myself. Hello. I forgot to say also that one of the biggest reads I'll have for the rest of the summer is Life and Fate by Vassily Grossman. I'm reading this as a buddy read with Teresa, and we have had a history of reading fantastic books together in the summer. 2 years ago, we read the Alexandria Quartet. That was such a fantastic series of books. And then last summer we read the Pat Barker Ghost Road trilogy. I guess is that what it's called? Anyway, the series of books by Pat Barker about the same characters in World War I. And so that was another fantastic book. And so now we're continuing that by reading Life and Fate together over July, August, and September. We're going to stretch it out and really enjoy reading this very long book together about another brutal chapter in the war. So this goes along with the BookTube at War theme that is happening in being sponsored by a series of people. So that was a very awkward way of saying it, but I didn't want to forget to put that into my video. This video is already pretty long, so I think that's all I will talk about for now. Having a really good summer reading experience so far. Looking forward to things, you know, kind of getting more put together back in our house. And we're celebrating this week our 37th wedding anniversary. I'm going to insert a picture from our wedding. So 37 years, it's pretty good. And we're just still going strong. So we had a nice dinner last night downtown, and that's how it's going so far. So let me know in the comments if you are interested in any of these books, or if you have read any of them, and I look forward to chatting with you down there. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.